So my 5-year-old niece, when this is her, when she meets me, the only thing that she wants to do is hear a story from me, and so she just keeps saying that Pranav Mama. I mean, she calls me Mama, and she says, "Please, please, please tell me a story." And I I'm forced to tell her a story, but not any story. She wants to hear a very specific story about a very specific boy named Harry Potter. And as you can see, he has a scar here because he is Harry Potter, and she just wants to hear the Harry Potter story from me. But that's not the weird part, right? I mean, everyone actually is every teenager, or not teenager, I should say, every toddler, every 4-year-old, 5-year-old, 6-year-old wants to hear Harry Potter stories. But that's not the part. That's not the weird part. Uh, when I'm telling her the story, and when Harry's doing well, when everything is going well for Harry, my niece is okay. I mean, she doesn't she's fine. I mean, she's not hating it, but she's not like particularly excited when Harry is winning, when Harry is defeating his villains, or when Harry is doing well in his exams. Everything is doing everything is well. But the moment when there is a disturbance in Harry's journey, the moment there is something that is affecting Harry, or the moment Harry is fighting with the snake, with the basilisk, or the moment Harry is fighting with the dragon, the my niece's eyes, they basically light up. She is extremely excited when Harry is in trouble, and her excitement level, which is usually flatline, now goes to a peak, and this is where the villain is introduced. And so it seems that my niece basically needs a villain in the story, but it's not just my niece, is it? It's also you, it's also me, it's your audience as well. So your audience needs a villain, and so your brand needs to create this particular villain, this evil guy who is tormenting your hero. That's what this is, right? This hero with this villain with the thorns is what your audience needs. And today I want to talk about who is this villain that your brand needs to create for the audience. Why do you need a villain in the first place, and how do you go about creating one? So these are the three questions that I want to answer for you today, right? Starting with who who or what is the villain, why do you need to create it, and how do you go about creating this villain? Okay, so let's start with the first part, which is who. Now, the villain is basically the one thing that your brand is fighting, right? So basically, your audience is trying to reach a goal. Okay, this is their goal, but there is this evil villain, who is standing in between. Right here, the villain is standing and is preventing this person going uh, from going here, right? So this villain is the obstacle, and your brand is fighting this particular villain, or the brand is helping the audience fight this particular villain. So just like Frodo was fighting Sauron, just like Harry Potter was fighting Voldemort, just like Poe from Kung Fu Panda was fighting the evil snow leopard named Tai Lung. Similarly, your brand is fighting this enemy on the behalf of your audience, right? Now, who is this villain though? This villain is basically the pain. Okay, the pain, or rather the reason why your audience is in pain. Your audience is in pain, and who is the reason for that? The villain is the reason for that. So just to give you a simple example, right? If you are selling, let me take a sip of coffee. If you're going to be selling a productivity software, and if the again, I'll clear the screen just to give you a better example or a better representation. If you want to if you want to make let's say your audience, basically the goal of this audience is to become extremely productive, right? I mean, that is the goal, but there is an enemy in between, and this enemy is basically the distractions. It's social media, it's Instagram, it's 100 other distractions. So this distraction is the villain, and your app, which is the productivity software, is basically helping this audience overcome this particular villain. right? So this is like, a good example, although it's a very simplistic one, because I mean there will be hundreds and thousands of productivity softwares, and they can't just have the same villain that is distraction, that is like a very generic villain. But yeah, I mean this was just to like give you an idea about who the audience is, who this villain is, which is preventing your audience from being productive, which is causing a lot of pain to your audience, and how your brand is helping your audience overcome this particular pain. Okay, so now that we have a certain idea about who this villain is, let's talk about why we need this villain in the first place. So see, the first thing to understand is that your audience is like I said, it's in pain. Okay, and they have a they know their pain, but they're like still very very confused as to why they are in pain. They keep asking themselves questions like, okay, why am I suffering? Why am I in pain? What is the reason behind my pain? Why don't I succeed? All of these questions are bothering them. Now when you present the villain, when the brand comes along, right, and when the brand comes and says that, hey, it's not your fault, it's so here is the audience, right, and here is the brand. And when the brand comes and says, hey, it's so this guy is saying, what, I am in pain, I'm not being able to reach my goals. But the brand is saying, the brand is comforting to the audience, or the brand is comforting the audience, sorry, that it's not your fault, it's not your fault, it's the fault of the villain, it's not your fault, it's the villain's fault. So basically, the reason you need a villain is because you are able to convince this particular person that, hey, it's not your fault. It's you're pushing this blame onto the villain. And when you are actually push this blame onto the villain, you're indirectly sending two messages to the audience. The first message that you're sending to the audience is that, hey, it's not you, and which is very important because we want to feel smart. The audience doesn't want to feel stupid. So if you say that, okay, you are suffering because you're stupid, or if you're in pain because you're stupid, then that's a recipe for disaster, right? But here I'm not calling you stupid, I'm calling the villain stupid, and I'm challenging your approach. It's the way you're doing things that is causing you problems. It's not really you. That is reason number one. And the second reason why this works is because the audience finally gets an explanation. It's like a light bulb moment that goes inside their head that, okay, this is why, sorry, this is why I am basically struggling because of this villain. And although the problem is not solved yet, right? I mean, the problem is not solved yet, but at least now I have some explanation as to why I'm suffering. And we love explanations. We love when there's finally some explanation as to why I'm actually suffering. So that's the two reasons that you basically need a villain. And finally, I would just say that once if your audience, once you give them this explanation about this villain, there is an incredible level of trust. Of course, if you do your job well, if the villain is created properly, they feel a certain level of trust with you. They feel seen, they feel heard, because finally someone has been able to articulate why they are struggling, and they have been able to articulate the reason they are struggling, right, which is like I said, is the villain. So this audience eventually trusts you if you do your job well, and then they buy from you, okay, eventually. And this won't happen if you don't understand them, or if you don't trust them, or other if they don't if you don't understand them, and if they don't trust you enough. Okay, so far we have covered who the villain is. We have covered why we need a villain for two, three reasons that I just described. I think the last part is like how do you create a villain in the first place? And so how do you do that, right? I mean, I have answered the other questions, but what about the actual creation of one? Well, the first instinct would probably be like just pick a villain from thin air. I'll just throw darts everywhere and maybe randomly pick a villain. But that's not really how you can how you need to go through this, because you need to understand the pains of your audience, and that can happen only when you talk to enough people. When you have enough conversations, you understand his pain, you understand her pain, you understand his pain. And that's when you start getting a certain idea about who this villain is, because this villain is the one who is preventing your audience from reaching their goal. So of course your product has to be aligned with solving this villain, but it also has to be aligned with the audience. It has got to be based in some kind of data, some kind of audience research, right? So let's take an example. let's say there is a guy named Ryan, okay, and Ryan is basically a little bit chubby. Okay, he's a little bit chubby, and he's trying to get to a place where he has 6-pack abs, or basically let's not even call it 6-pack abs. That's misleading. Let's just say that he wants to be fit. Okay, he just wants to be fit. That's what his ultimate goal is. He just wants to be a fit. I don't know why I do 4 hands. He basically has only 2 hands. He just wants to be fit. And so what does he do, right? I mean, to get to this journey, what does he do? To get to this goal, what does he do? Well, he first visits a fancy dietitian. Okay, he goes to a fancy dietitian, and the dietitian basically says, okay, you know what, you want to get fit, right? Okay, we have to completely revamp your diet. We have to basically substitute. If you have been eating a lot of rice, we basically have to substitute this rice with broccoli, with tofu, with quinoa, whatever it's called. Basically, all exotic stuff. And what does Ryan do? Ryan's motivation after hearing this, it goes through the roof. He's excited. He goes on shopping. He buys all these new fancy vegetables. He completely revamps his diet. But with no time, his motivation basically drops, because he's not able to sustain this fancy diet that was prescribed to him by his dietitian. Now let's say if you are a fitness coach, right, and if there is Ryan here, and Ryan is again frustrated and he's not being able to lose weight, and you come here, you're of course optimistic, and you want to help Ryan achieve his goal, right? So what is the villain in this case? That's the question. I mean, that's what we're trying to find out here. How do you find the villain? Well, the first, obvious answer to this would be laziness. I say that Ryan, the villain is laziness. You are suffering because of this particular thing, and you just need to get over this so that you're able to achieve your goals. Okay, no, the answer is not laziness. Laziness is a terrible, terrible villain for 2 reasons. Reason number 1 is that we are not living in the 1960s. Okay, we are not living in the 1960s where this villain would have worked. Maybe it would have worked. I still think it's a bad villain, but maybe back then there was less competition, so this villain might have worked. But the other reason this is a bad villain is because this is based in the identity of Ryan. You're calling Ryan a lazy person, and Ryan doesn't want to be called lazy. No one wants to be called stupid, lazy, or incompetent in any way. Ryan, you have to convince Ryan that, Ryan, it's not you, it's the approach that you have been taking. It's the approach that is wrong. It's the way you have been doing things that is the villain. It's not really it's not really you. Okay, so we are back to square one. What is the villain then? Well, the villain is always out in the open. The villain basically is fancy diets. That's the villain. Okay, remember, you're not targeting the dietitian in specific. You're targeting this way of doing things, which is that, Ryan, my friend, you are struggling to achieve your goals. Okay, this is the goal, which is fit Ryan. Okay, and this is, let's say, a little bit unfit Ryan, I'll say. And the only reason that is stopping you from going here to there is this one specific villain, which is not laziness. It's the fact that you have been relying on fancy diets. You have been trying to completely change your lifestyle, which is sustainable in the short run, but it's not very sustainable in the long run. So fancy diet is the problem, and me as a dietitian or as a nutritionist, I am going to propose you a new game, okay, to defeat this or to achieve your goal, which is what this new game is basically: flexible dieting. Okay, I am going to take into consideration who you are, and I am going to give you minimal changes so that you don't change your diet altogether. You are a lot more flexible and with your dieting, and eventually this is the better way for you to reach your goal. So that's how you create one. Okay, I'm going to give you one last example. Which is about Jonathan Stark. So Jonathan Stark is one of my favorite, you can say, entrepreneurs, marketers, and you can just check his website, jonathanstark.com. Jonathan Stark basically helps experts and entrepreneurs earn more money, right? I mean, his promise is simple: I'll help you earn more money, and I will help you reduce the time that you spend working. Now, Jonathan has chosen the villain of hourly billing. Okay, so what Jonathan basically realized after talking to his audience, he realized that most of his audience is exchanging their time. Okay, so they give time and they get money in exchange. That is what they do. But he realized that okay, this is not a fair trade, and you should not never money. You should never charge based on your time. Which means that if you're working for X hours, you charge, let's say, Y dollars. But if you're working for 2X, then you charge 2Y. This is not a good way. Okay, that is what he realized. So he realized that the enemy here is what? The enemy is hourly billing. Hourly billing is the enemy. Hourly billing is the enemy, and that is what I'm going to target. And if you look at his website, that is what you see. And then he proposes a new game or a new way of doing things. That okay, Mr. Consultant, you are struggling because you're going ahead with hourly billing. Instead, you go with value-based pricing. That is the game that he suggests. Okay, so basically he's saying, please avoid this, this is not good for you, and go ahead with this. This is basically good for you. So yeah, I just to conclude, right? We talked about who this villain is. We talked about why we need this villain, because your audience wants to feel seen, and they want to understand why they're suffering, and you want, as a brand, want to earn trust within them. Then we spoke about how to create them, and that you really need to understand your audience a lot more. You really need to understand why they are struggling, and that's how you create a villain for your brand. So I hope this is helpful, and if at all you need some feedback from me or my niece, who are both excellent storytellers and story listeners, please feel free to reach out. But I hope that you find this video genuinely helpful. All right, that's it. Thanks, guys.